Our marriage was, by all outward appearances, idyllic. After nearly 10 years together, Emily and I had built a life that friends envied. She was radiant and driven, her career as a graphic designer flourishing alongside her passion for fitness. I was steady, working long hours at a financial firm to provide the life we both dreamed of. Our relationship was built on shared goals, mutual respect, and what I believed was unwavering trust. Emily's newfound obsession with the gym began about a year ago. She had always been active, but after she signed up for a membership at the upscale fitness club downtown, it became her second home. First, I admired her dedication. She'd come home glowing, telling me about the classes she took or the milestones she achieved. It was good for her, or so I thought. Her trainer, Marcus, was a name I heard often in her stories. He was her personal coach, someone who, according to Emily, pushed her to new limits. She'd talk about how he designed personalized workouts for her, how he motivated her when she felt like giving up. I didn't think much of it. Marcus was just another professional in her orbit, someone who helped her pursue her goals. I had no reason to suspect otherwise. It wasn't long before the gym began to take precedence over other parts of our life. Emily's schedule revolved around her workouts, her evenings often spent at the club or attending events they hosted. She'd come home later than expected, her explanations vague but plausible. I told myself it was fine, that she deserved to have something that was just hers. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice subtle changes. Emily's phone became an extension of her hand. She was constantly texting, her screen angled away whenever I walked by. She'd laugh at messages but rarely share what they were about. Her wardrobe also began to shift. Sleek workout gear replaced her usual casual outfits, and she seemed to relish the compliments she received about her appearance. I told myself these changes were a reflection of her confidence, the result of all her hard work. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered otherwise. The first time I felt real unease was during an evening when Emily was out late at a gym social. I had stayed home, exhausted from work, expecting her to return by 9. When the clock struck 11 and she still wasn't back, I called her. She didn't answer, and my messages went unread. She came home just after midnight, her face flushed and her explanation vague. There had been a mix-up with the schedule, she said, and she'd lost track of time. Her tone was apologetic but dismissive, as though it was no big deal. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But the doubt lingered. I began paying closer attention, noting the times she left and returned, the excuses she gave, the way her stories didn't always line up. It felt like I was piecing together a puzzle without knowing what the final picture would reveal. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the cracks in our life together were becoming impossible to ignore. One Saturday afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed while she was in the shower. It wasn't unusual for her to receive messages, but the notification preview caught my eye. Had a great time yesterday. Can't wait to see you again. The sender was simply listed as M. My heart sank. I didn't open the message. Instead, I placed the phone back on the counter and tried to steady my racing thoughts. When Emily emerged from the shower, I acted normal, but my mind was anything but. Who was M? Was it Marcus? What did he mean by great time? The questions swirled, each one more unsettling than the last. Unable to shake my suspicions, I decided to dig deeper. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to Emily's behavior. Her enthusiasm for the gym seemed to increase, her sessions with Marcus more frequent. She'd talk about how he pushed her limits, how he believed in her potential. It was always about her progress, her goals, her achievements. But the way she spoke about him, the admiration in her voice, felt different. One evening, while she was asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked through her phone. It was a violation of her privacy, something I'd always sworn I'd never do. But my need for answers outweighed my guilt. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The messages between Emily and Marcus were frequent, their tone casual but flirtatious. They shared inside jokes, exchanged compliments, and spoke in a way that felt far too intimate for a professional relationship. One message stood out. "Last night was amazing. You're incredible." My stomach churned as I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my mind raced to process what I was seeing. Confronting her without proof felt premature, so I began documenting everything. I kept track of her gym schedule, noting the nights she stayed late. I checked our shared finances, finding receipts for restaurants and activities I hadn't known about. I even followed her one evening, my heart pounding as I trailed her car to a small, upscale bistro on the edge of town. From my parked car, I watched as she and Marcus walked inside, their body language intimate, their laughter carrying through the air. The evidence was mounting, but so was my dread. Each new discovery felt like another crack in the foundation of our marriage, a reminder that the life I thought I knew was slipping away. Yet, amidst the anger and betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed more time, more clarity, more certainty about what I wanted to do. As the days turned into weeks, I began to formulate a plan. Emily and Marcus had built their connection on secrecy, on the assumption that I wouldn't notice or wouldn't act. But they had underestimated me. If they wanted to keep me in the dark, I would bring everything into the light. And when the moment came, they wouldn't see it coming. The days following my decision to dig deeper were marked by a strange mix of dread and determination. I couldn't shake the weight of what I had uncovered, but I knew there was more to their story than the cryptic messages and stolen moments. If I was going to confront Emily, I needed everything. I needed her lies to unravel in front of her with no room for denial or manipulation. I started with her phone. It became an obsession, checking her messages late at night while she slept soundly beside me. The pattern of her exchanges with Marcus was undeniable. They texted often, their conversations peppered with jokes, compliments, and plans that contradicted her explanations of late nights at the gym. One message read, "I can't wait for our next session. You make everything worth it." Her calendar became another source of evidence. She meticulously tracked her workouts, noting personal training sessions with Marcus. But there were inconsistencies. Gaps where she was unreachable, blocks of time labeled vaguely as appointments. I cross-referenced these with her credit card statements, finding charges for places she hadn't mentioned: cafes, wine bars, and boutique hotels. I began to see her gym bag differently, too. It wasn't just filled with the essentials for working out. I found expensive makeup and perfume she'd never used at home, along with clothes that seemed more suited for a night out than a workout. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle, the picture becoming clearer with every passing day. Mark, my oldest friend, was the only person I confided in. I had kept my suspicions to myself, unsure how to navigate the betrayal that loomed over my marriage. But Mark was the kind of friend who could be counted on for discretion and unwavering loyalty. When I told him about Emily and Marcus, his reaction was a mix of disbelief and anger on my behalf. "You deserve to know the whole truth," he said, his voice firm. "If she's lying to you, you have every right to find out." Mark's experience as a private investigator, a career path I had once teased him about, suddenly became invaluable. He offered to help me gather more concrete evidence, using methods I wouldn't have dared to attempt on my own. With his guidance, I set up a discreet GPS tracker on Emily's car and installed monitoring software on her phone. It felt invasive, but my desperation for clarity outweighed the guilt. The GPS tracker revealed a pattern that sent chills down my spine. Emily's car frequently parked near places that didn't align with her explanations. Restaurants far from the gym, quiet parks late at night, and, most damningly, a modest apartment complex across town. The apartment belonged to Marcus, as Mark quickly confirmed through public records. I followed her one evening, my heart pounding as I trailed her car at a safe distance. She parked outside the apartment building and walked inside, her demeanor casual but purposeful. I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel, until she emerged an hour later. She wasn't carrying gym gear or looking flustered from an intense workout. Instead, she seemed calm, almost content, as she returned to her car and drove away. The confirmation was both devastating and validating. There was no doubt now. Emily and Marcus were more than trainer and client. While confronting Emily directly felt premature, I couldn't resist the urge to face Marcus. I visited the gym one evening, arriving just before his last session ended. The facility was bustling with activity, the rhythmic clanking of weights and hum of conversation masking the tension I carried as I approached him. Marcus greeted me with his usual professional charm, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. He knew who I was, and he knew why I was there. I wasted no time, laying out what I had discovered with cold precision. His confident facade faltered as I listed the times, places, and messages that exposed his relationship with Emily. He didn't deny it. Instead, he offered a hollow apology, claiming he hadn't meant to hurt anyone. His excuses only fueled my anger. I left the gym that night with no intention of letting him off the hook, my resolve to confront Emily stronger than ever. When I finally confronted Emily, it was in the quiet of our living room, the evidence laid out between us like a crime scene. I showed her the messages, the receipts, and the GPS logs, each piece an undeniable testament to her betrayal. She didn't deny it, but her explanations were a jumble of excuses and justifications. She claimed the affair had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment born from feeling neglected and unappreciated. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, her words pleading for understanding. But her excuses only deepened the chasm between us. The woman I thought I knew had become a stranger, her actions eroding the trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage. In the midst of her confession, Emily revealed something that changed everything. She admitted that Marcus had manipulated her, using his position as her trainer to exploit her vulnerabilities. He had encouraged her to confide in him, creating an emotional dependency that blurred the lines between professional and personal. What had started as innocent support had spiraled into something far more damaging. Her revelation didn't absolve her, but it added a layer of complexity to the situation. It was no longer just about infidelity. It was about manipulation, power dynamics, and the erosion of boundaries. As I listened to her, my anger gave way to a deep sadness, a mourning for the relationship we had lost and the trust that could never be fully restored. After Emily's confession, I knew I had to make a decision. Our marriage was in ruins, but the question remained. Could it be rebuilt? Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance to make amends and prove her commitment to change. But another part of me wondered if some betrayals were too deep to overcome. I told her I needed time to think, to process everything and decide what was best for both of us. She agreed, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and regret. As I left the house that night, I felt the weight of the choices ahead, the path forward shrouded in uncertainty. The days following Emily's confession were a blur of conflicting emotions. My mind swung wildly between anger, sadness, and a strange numbness that settled in when the weight of it all became too much. I stayed at Mark's place, using the quiet of his spare room to think, but the silence was oppressive. The memories of Emily, her smile, her laughter, the way we had once planned our future, kept intruding, taunting me with what was now irreparably broken. Mark, ever the pragmatic friend, suggested I speak with someone impartial. "You're drowning in it," he said, his voice steady. "You need clarity, not just emotions." Reluctantly, I agreed to see a counselor. The sessions were awkward at first, filled with pauses and half-formed sentences. But over time, they helped me process the betrayal and understand the deeper issues beneath the surface. The counselor asked questions I hadn't considered. Had there been cracks in my relationship with Emily before Marcus entered the picture? Were there moments when I had been too absorbed in my own life to notice her struggles? It wasn't about excusing her actions but understanding the factors that had led us here. The answers were uncomfortable but necessary. Emily, for her part, seemed genuinely remorseful. She sent messages daily, expressing regret and pleading for a chance to make things right. She admitted to cutting ties with Marcus and even left the gym she had loved so much. She offered to go to counseling, both individually and as a couple, and promised transparency in every aspect of her life. But her efforts felt hollow to me. Trust, once shattered, is not easily rebuilt. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was met with skepticism. I couldn't shake the image of her and Marcus, the messages they had exchanged, the secrets they had shared. Her remorse might have been genuine, but it didn't erase the choices she had made. As if the emotional fallout wasn't enough, Marcus re-entered the picture in a way I hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, I received a call from Mark. His voice was tense as he relayed the news. Marcus was threatening legal action. Apparently, he had discovered the GPS tracker and claimed it was an invasion of privacy. He demanded compensation and threatened to expose my actions publicly if I didn't comply. The irony was maddening. Marcus, the man who had exploited my wife and manipulated her into an affair, now claimed to be the victim. The audacity of his threats ignited a fire in me. I consulted a lawyer, who assured me that the case was weak, given the circumstances and Marcus's own misconduct. Still, the situation added another layer of stress to an already overwhelming ordeal. Despite her promises to cut ties, Emily's connection to Marcus wasn't as severed as she claimed. Through Mark's investigative work, I discovered that they had been in contact. Sporadically, but enough to shatter any hope of reconciliation. When I confronted her with this, her reaction was one of panic and desperation. She swore the communication had been brief, that Marcus had reached out to apologize and she had responded out of fear, not desire. Her explanation didn't matter. The damage was done. Her actions had confirmed what I had suspected all along. The bond they had formed was not something she could easily break. The betrayal wasn't just physical or emotional. It was a pattern of deceit that ran deeper than I had imagined. The revelation about Emily's continued contact with Marcus pushed me to take action. I decided to expose Marcus for the manipulator he was. With Mark's help, we gathered evidence of his inappropriate behavior at the gym. Not just with Emily but with other clients as well. Former members came forward, sharing stories of how he had crossed professional boundaries, creating a toxic environment under the guise of support. The gym's management, faced with mounting complaints and undeniable proof, terminated Marcus's employment. His reputation, once that of a respected trainer, was now tarnished. It wasn't the kind of victory that brought joy, but it was satisfying to know that he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he had hurt me. After Marcus's downfall, Emily made one last effort to salvage our marriage. She showed up at Mark's place unannounced, her eyes red from crying, her hands trembling as she begged me to listen. She spoke of how much she loved me, how she had let her insecurities and loneliness drive her to make terrible choices. She admitted that she didn't deserve forgiveness, but hoped I could find it in my heart to give her another chance. Her words were raw, her pain palpable. For the first time, I saw the depth of her regret, the weight of the guilt she carried. But I also saw the distance between us, the chasm created by her betrayal. Love, I realized, wasn't always enough. Sometimes the damage was too great to repair. After much soul-searching, I made my decision. I told Emily that I couldn't continue our marriage, that the trust we had once shared was gone. She nodded through her tears, her expression one of resignation and sorrow. We agreed to part ways amicably, dividing our assets and moving on with our lives. The process was painful but necessary. As I packed my belongings and prepared to leave the home we had shared, I felt a mix of grief and relief. Grief for what we had lost, but relief at the thought of starting fresh, free from the shadows of betrayal. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends. Mark remained a constant presence, his support unwavering as I navigated the challenges of starting over. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized how far I had come. The pain of Emily's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. When Emily and I finalized our divorce, it felt like the closing of a heavy door. Yet, the echoes of what had transpired lingered in my mind, haunting my thoughts as I tried to move forward. I thought the worst was behind me, the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak. But life had a way of dealing cards I wasn't prepared for. Months after the divorce was finalized, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." Suspicion and curiosity waged war in my mind as I opened it. The email was short and to the point. *Hi, I don't know you, but I know about what happened. Marcus isn't who he claims to be. I have information that could change how you see everything. If you want to know more, meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street tomorrow at 7 p.m. The message was unsigned. My first instinct was to ignore it, to dismiss it as some sort of scam or cruel joke. But something about the tone felt genuine, almost desperate. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. The next evening, I found myself sitting in a corner booth at the coffee shop, scanning every face that walked through the door. A woman approached me, her expression cautious but resolute. She introduced herself as Amanda and explained that she had been one of Marcus's clients before Emily. What she shared left me reeling. According to Amanda, Marcus had a history of exploiting vulnerable clients, creating personal and emotional entanglements under the guise of support. She had been one of his first targets, drawn in by his charm and promises of personal transformation. Their training sessions had turned into something more, much like what had happened with Emily. But Amanda's story didn't end with an affair. She revealed that Marcus had manipulated her into investing in a fake business venture, convincing her to part with thousands of dollars. When she started asking questions, he cut ties and disappeared, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She had been tracking his movements ever since, hoping to warn others about his schemes. "You're not the first," Amanda said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "And I doubt you'll be the last." Amanda's revelations reignited the fire in me. Marcus wasn't just a manipulator. He was a predator who thrived on deceit and exploitation. I couldn't sit idly by while he continued to hurt people. With Amanda's help, I began piecing together his history, reaching out to others who had encountered him. Each story was eerily similar. Trust betrayed, boundaries crossed, lives disrupted. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Marcus had left a trail of destruction in his wake. Yet, he had managed to evade accountability, moving from gym to gym, city to city, always staying one step ahead. It was infuriating, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. If no one else would stop him, I would. Mark, ever the loyal friend, was eager to help. Together, we compiled a dossier of evidence against Marcus. Testimonials from his former clients, financial records showing questionable transactions, and even surveillance footage from his time at the gym. We also found that he had been operating under multiple aliases, a fact that added another layer of deceit to his already damning profile. The goal was simple: expose Marcus for who he truly was. We shared our findings with the management at his current gym, as well as local authorities. The response was immediate. Marcus was terminated from his position, and an investigation was launched into his activities. For the first time, it felt like justice was within reach. Throughout all of this, I kept Emily informed. Despite everything that had happened between us, I felt she had a right to know the truth about Marcus. Her reaction was a mix of anger and shame. She admitted that she had ignored red flags, blinded by his charm and the attention he gave her. "I should have seen it," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I let myself be used." Emily's acknowledgement didn't absolve her of her actions, but it did offer a glimpse of her humanity. She had been a victim in her own way, though her choices had still caused me immeasurable pain. Our conversations during this time were civil but distant, two people navigating the wreckage of what once was. Just when it seemed like Marcus's reign of manipulation was over, he struck back. He hired a lawyer and filed a defamation suit against me and Amanda, claiming that our actions had ruined his reputation and cost him his livelihood. The audacity of his move left me speechless. The man who had preyed on countless individuals now positioned himself as the victim. The legal battle was grueling. Marcus's team painted him as a misunderstood professional whose personal relationships had been misconstrued. But the evidence we had gathered was overwhelming. Former clients testified, recounting their experiences with Marcus in heartbreaking detail. Amanda's story, in particular, was a turning point. Her courage in sharing her ordeal exposed the depths of Marcus's deceit. In the end, the court ruled in our favor. Marcus's suit was dismissed, and he was ordered to pay damages for the harm he had caused. The victory was bittersweet. It didn't erase the pain or undo the damage, but it was a step toward justice. With Marcus out of the picture, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. The chapter of my life defined by betrayal and heartbreak was finally coming to an end. Emily and I remained in sporadic contact. Our conversations focused on practical matters rather than the emotional minefield of our past. One day, as I walked through the park near my new apartment, I realized how far I had come. The pain of Emily's betrayal no longer consumed me. I had found strength in facing the truth, in standing up to someone who thrived on deception. I wasn't the same person I had been before, but I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. Months after the legal battle ended, life finally began to regain a sense of normalcy. The storm of betrayal and deception had passed, leaving behind a quieter, more reflective reality. I had moved into a new apartment, a modest but comfortable space that felt entirely mine. It was the first step toward building a life unburdened by the ghosts of the past. Living alone gave me time to process everything. I took long walks in the park, joined a local book club, and even started volunteering at a community center. These small acts of connection helped me rebuild my sense of self piece by piece. I wasn't the same man I had been before Emily's betrayal, but I was learning to accept that. Growth often came with scars. Emily and I no longer spoke regularly. Our contact was limited to occasional texts about unresolved logistics or shared memories that surfaced in the aftermath of our divorce. There was no animosity between us, but neither was there the warmth that had once defined our relationship. She had moved on in her own way, focusing on her career and, from what I gathered, seeking therapy to confront the choices that had led her down such a destructive path. One crisp autumn morning, as I sat on a bench with a cup of coffee, watching the leaves fall, a familiar voice broke my reverie. It was Amanda, the woman who had helped expose Marcus. She looked more relaxed than when we had first met, her confidence restored in a way that made her seem like an entirely different person. We talked for a while, catching up on how our lives had changed since Marcus's downfall. She shared that she had started a blog to raise awareness about manipulative practices in the fitness industry, using her experiences to help others recognize red flags. Her resilience was inspiring, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to rebuild and thrive. Before we parted ways, Amanda handed me an envelope. "I've been meaning to give you this," she said. "It's something I found when I was digging into Marcus's past. I wasn't sure if it would matter to you, but I think you deserve to see it." Curiosity gnawed at me as I opened the envelope. Inside was a series of documents, old emails, financial records, and a photo that made my stomach drop. It was a picture of Emily and Marcus, taken months before they had officially met at the gym. They were at a small, private event, their body language suggesting familiarity that couldn't be dismissed as coincidental. The documents revealed that Emily and Marcus's connection hadn't been a spontaneous affair born from her vulnerability. They had known each other prior to her joining the gym. The emails detailed a calculated plan to exploit my trust and resources. Marcus had targeted Emily not just as a romantic conquest but as a pawn in his larger schemes. And she, whether out of desperation or complicity, had gone along with it. The realization hit me like a freight train. Emily's betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness. It was part of a premeditated act. The excuses she had offered, the tears she had shed, the remorse she had expressed. All of it now felt like a performance designed to mitigate her culpability. For days, I wrestled with whether to confront Emily with this new information. In the end, I decided against it. The past was already too heavy, and dredging it up again felt like reopening a wound that was finally starting to heal. What good would it do? She had made her choices, and I had made mine. The best thing I could do was move forward, unburdened by her deceit. Instead, I contacted Amanda and thanked her for sharing the truth. Her courage had given me the final piece of the puzzle, allowing me to see the full scope of what had happened. It was a painful revelation, but it also brought a sense of closure. There were no more questions, no more what-ifs. I knew the truth, and that was enough. With the weight of the past fully behind me, I focused on the future. I threw myself into my work, finding satisfaction in small successes that reminded me of my competence and resilience. I rekindled friendships that had faded during the years of my marriage, reconnecting with people who reminded me of the person I had been before everything fell apart. One evening, at a charity event organized by the community center where I volunteered, I met someone new. Her name was Rachel, a schoolteacher with a quick wit and a warm smile. Our conversation flowed easily, unburdened by the shadows of the past. She didn't ask about my history, and I didn't feel the need to share it. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. As the year came to an end, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the loss. It had all shaped me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. But it had also taught me the value of resilience, the importance of boundaries, and the strength it took to let go. Marcus's schemes had unraveled, Emily's lies had been exposed, and the life I thought I knew had been turned upside down. Yet, in the rubble of that life, I had found something new. Clarity, freedom, and the courage to start over. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to write the next chapter of my story, one that was entirely my own.